is a launch partner for Amazon Web Services EC2 Dedicated Hosts, and we thank you again for joining us and will begin shortly. First, let me cover a few housekeeping items. All guests are joined in listen-only mode, but our team is monitoring the chat window for live Q&A, which will be addressed throughout today's session. You are also welcome to email me directly at ehunter@csgservices.com, and I will have our internal team of experts answer your questions directly. I'd now like to introduce today's presenters, Dennis Tortop, Head of Worldwide Sales for the Microsoft Platform on AWS, and Scott Zimmerman, Solutions Architect for AWS supporting the Windows Platform. As a reminder, any questions during this webinar, please email ehunter@csgservices.com. Dennis, I'll now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Erin. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Once again, my name is Dennis Tortop, and I head up the sales efforts for the Microsoft Platform on AWS. I'm here with Scott Zimmerman, Solutions Architect for the Microsoft Platform running on AWS. Today in this webinar, we're going to focus on licensing. We're going to cover bringing your own licenses to the AWS Cloud, including Windows 7, Windows Server 2012, earlier, later versions of Windows. We're going to cover leveraging your own licensing agreements, including SPLA, SPLA, as Microsoft likes to call it, EA, Enterprise Agreement, HISP, Hosted ISV, if you like to host your own intellectual property to provide services to third parties, or other Microsoft license agreements while it's enjoying Amazon EC2 Linux rates on Windows instances. So basically, the savings that you can achieve bringing your own license to Amazon Web Services. And then last but not least, we're going to cover some of the dedicated infrastructure options to help you meet compliance and regulatory requirements using instant placements at the physical host level. It's a new offer that we launched, Dedicated Hosts, and we're going to touch on that. So let's cover the licensing options on AWS. There are a few. Microsoft licensing can get complex very quick, and we have a number of options available to you to take advantage of the two vendors offer, Microsoft with their licensing and AWS with the infrastructure. There are three ways you can acquire licensing from Amazon. The first way is Amazon machine instances. We call them AMIs, AMIs. Amazon machine images come with pre-installed licenses of software that we got from our vendors, including Microsoft Windows Server, Red Hat Linux, etc. BYOL, bring your own license with license mobility, is another way you could bring your own operating systems or software licenses over to Amazon. BYOL with dedicated hosts gives you more flexible terms to bring your own licenses over to Amazon and enjoy Linux rates, and we're going to cover all three. First option is buying licenses from AWS. You can buy Windows Server or Windows Server plus SQL Server from AWS with EC2 instances. If you do that, we simply provision a virtual machine for you. That's a process that takes just a few minutes, depending on the instance size. And you basically get a virtual machine with Windows pre-installed or Windows plus SQL Server pre-installed. We've got many different editions and languages for those two pieces of software with over 100 combinations in our data centers worldwide. If you do that, AWS manages license and compliance. We take care of all the license acquisition, and then you just enjoy the virtual machine for the workload of your choice. It supports many current and legacy versions up to Windows Server 2012, and I believe our earliest version that we offer today is Windows Server 2003, including 32-bit editions. If you go that path, Windows Client Server Access, CALs, access licenses are not required. Amazon Web Services is SPLA with Microsoft, and we take advantage of Microsoft's per core and per CPU pricing for unlimited users. Any other licenses you have, such as Exchange, SharePoint, BizDoc, System Center, etc., you can put on top of that using either license mobility or dedicated infrastructure. We're going to touch on that in a little bit. The next topic is bringing existing licenses to AWS. One way to do that is using license mobility through software assurance, which requires you to have active software assurance and licenses eligible for software assurance. Another way you can bring your own licenses to AWS is using dedicated infrastructure, tapping into the outsourcing clause in your license agreement versus the cloud provider clause. Microsoft is a lot more generous with terms when it comes to having dedicated hardware versus multi-tenant. If you bring your existing Microsoft license on AWS, you have a number of benefits. One is taking advantage of the efficiencies of the cloud while still purchasing perpetual licenses. A lot of customers do like to purchase perpetual licenses, yet still want to be on the cloud. That's one way to do that. Of course, if you have an agreement like SPLA or some sort of a subscription agreement with Microsoft, it is possible to bring those licenses to AWS as well. Of course, if you do that, you can extend the life cycle of your software without additional hardware cost. You would pay on an as-you-go basis. That's the beauty of the cloud computing. And then you can expedite your migration to the cloud by using existing virtual machine images. That's made possible through a number of tools that we have, including VM Imports, a first-party tool from AWS, that allows you to migrate existing virtual machines 20 at a time in parallel, using both the software configurations and the licensing keys to unlock them. Microsoft has a number of licensing programs that support the cloud, so let's go over them. The first one is the Service Provider License Agreements, SPLA or SPLA. It allows service providers to resell Microsoft software. It's primarily used to provide third-party services to non-employees. SPLA partner only pays for as much software as they provide to customers. It's billed on a monthly basis, or it's reported on a monthly basis. They can always access the latest version of Microsoft software. And for products like Windows and SQL, they must report usage at a core and socket level. AWS is a SPLA partner, and we understand that license compliance can get complex very fast. Microsoft Enterprise Agreement is a perpetual, typically a perpetual type of agreement, even though subscription versions are available. It's designed for organizations with more than 250 users. It is a minimum 3-year term. It does include software assurance for the term of it. It can be extended. Users have the ability to add devices as they go, but they must true up with Microsoft on a regular basis. Depending on the agreement type, it could be annual or ongoing. Microsoft License Mobility allows customers to deploy licenses purchased for on-premises environment into the cloud environments. License Mobility has a pretty good benefit called software assurance that allows customers to move many types of licenses, including Exchange and SharePoint, to multi-tenant third-party clouds. Dynamics is another one that we see quite often. One rule that license mobility has that we have ways to solve for that customers do not necessarily love is the 90-day reassignment rule. According to many interpretations, once a license has been assigned to a server, it cannot be reassigned or moved to another server for 90 days. Microsoft is pretty crisp and short in their rule. If you went ahead and read your license agreement, they would just say this software cannot be reassigned for 90 days without going into further detail. But we interpret this as a license once assigned to a server cannot be moved to another for 90 days. We do have technical ways to solve for that rule. This next one discusses moving Microsoft licenses to public cloud environments. And as you look to take existing licenses to the cloud, there are some questions that come to mind that we're hoping to attempt to answer today. The first one is how to gain visibility into usage at the core and socket level. We have ways to solve that because a lot of times in a typical cloud, in a typical multi-tenant cloud, we discuss virtual CPUs and hyper-threading, and you don't necessarily know what the underlying hardware is. Not always, anyways. The next one is how to use Windows Server and also Windows client licenses, including Windows Server 2012 and Windows 7. Those licenses are not covered by license mobility. In case you didn't know, Office licenses, Microsoft Office licenses, are not covered by licensability either. Even if they have software assurance, it is not possible to move them to a multi-tenant cloud. And then we discussed the 90-day rule. A lot of customers observe that rule. A license may not be reassigned for a 90-day period. In other words, it may not be moved from one server to another. And we've got some instance affinity technology that we're going to discuss later today in this session that will help you answer that question. With that said, I'd like to pass it on to my colleague, Scott Zimmerman, to discuss Amazon EC2 Dedicated Infrastructure and the options that it presents.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dennis, very much. And I'm going to talk through the dedicated infrastructure. We have two options here. We have dedicated hosts and we have dedicated instances. Let's start with dedicated hosts. What they do is they give you the ability to access our physical servers on Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud, which is called EC2, and it's fully dedicated to your use. So you have control over how you place your instances on that server. So when we say dedicated host, keep in mind that you can have multiple instances of the operating system running on that server inside of that host. You can continue to use that same server over time, even as you stop and start your instances. And this is very important in relation to the point that Dennis brought up just a moment ago about the Microsoft license agreements and the 90-day rule. And we'll talk about that more as we go along. Now, you can also still use our very popular VM import and export service. So that means you can move your existing Hyper-V and VMware images, including your software license keys. You can move those to AWS and deploy them on dedicated hosts. Now this diagram shows you how a normal EC2 instance looks on the left, where you'll see that we have on the virtual CPUs, we may spread across on a given physical machine, there may be several customers using that server, that physical server. Whereas on the right, you see the dedicated hosts, where you have allocated all of those virtual CPUs to yourself, and so you're the lone customer on that host, and that's how it gets its name. It is a host machine dedicated to you. So it is single tenant as opposed to multi-tenant, which you see on the left. Now you pay for the whole host as opposed to paying for the instance. But that gives you several very significant license benefits in relation to licensing that'll come up as we go along here. It can substantially reduce your costs, in other words. Now, dedicated host gives you this license flexibility, so you can keep your software running on that host that you've assigned to yourself, and therefore satisfy the Microsoft 90-day rule. The placement controls that you get enable you to help you meet these stringent compliance and regulatory requirements. So it's not just about licensing. We also have a service called AWS Config, and that allows you to record when your instances start and stop or terminate, and that can help you out with your license contracts for reporting true-ups, etc. So that service is very helpful for being able to see how long you've been running the instances. Now this table shows some of the benefits, or the features, if you will, of dedicated instances versus dedicated hosts. Keep in mind that we've had the dedicated instances offering for quite some time, but we've only recently launched the dedicated host capability. As you can see, dedicated hosts provide many more features, and this was by design to help meet several of these questions that customers had asked us, and to help them improve the way that they deploy in the cloud per their Microsoft license agreement. So I've already covered a few of these, such as affinity and the visibility of which sockets you're running on. That comes up with the AWS config service, and our CloudWatch service can take advantage of this to be able to monitor what instances you have running and how long and how often. Now, in addition to whether you choose to run a regular instance in Amazon EC2 where you just have a virtual machine that is part of a physical machine, or whether you use our dedicated hosts or dedicated instances, you also have a separate choice, which is regarding payment options. So this is a different topic, unrelated to dedicated infrastructure exactly, but you have a choice of how you pay for your dedicated infrastructure. So you can do it on a per hour basis or instance billing. With dedicated hosts, you're paying again for the entire host machine for the full hour. You can again, as with all AWS services, you can scale up and down as needed, so you're never paying for infrastructure that you don't need. This allows you to match your elastic usage curve very much to your elastic provisioned curve. In other words, you don't have to greatly over provision to handle rare spike occurrences. You can just spike up as needed and spike and then scale back down almost as fast. With the reserved instances type, you can reserve an instance for 1 or a 3-year term and substantially decrease your bill versus the hourly, what we call on demand. So just to say that again, we have on-demand pricing where you're paying on an hourly basis, and it includes the typically includes the Windows Server license in that price. When you're using 1 or 3-year reserved instances, you're paying a small portion up front, and you're dramatically decreasing your total cost that way. In fact, you can save up to 70% per year that way. So with dedicated infrastructure, including dedicated instances and dedicated hosts, again, just to recap, you're getting to upgrade the hardware with no procurement or deployment costs or downtime, because you can take advantage of the hardware and reserve that for a full year. You're getting automatic scaling and load balancing, because you can use our elastic load balancing service, for example, as a front end for your web applications. But you can also spread your application across multiple virtual CPUs on the same dedicated host. You're able to take advantage of the entire physical server so that you can utilize all your application can be running on multiple CPUs that way. And the main benefit of this is that if you have a dedicated host, you're going to not have to pay for our hourly rate for the Windows license. If you use your existing licenses, you're basically able to pay us for our Amazon EC2 Linux rate. Keep in mind that our Amazon Linux rates on an hourly basis are our lowest price point for using EC2 because they do not come with the Microsoft Windows Server license. So if you use dedicated hosts and bring your own license, you're able to pay only for that lowest price instance cost, as if it was running Linux, but you can run Windows Server on it. Okay, so now let's shift gears a little bit and do an overview of some of the quick overview of why you would even consider using AWS. The key thing that comes to mind here is just our cloud leadership. We've been at this now for 9.5 years, and we're rated by Gartner as the far and away in the upper right corner of their quadrant for infrastructure as a service as the industry leader. In fact, AWS has more servers deployed than all other 14 cloud vendors combined. In fact, 10 times more than all other 14 cloud vendors combined. Now that's coming from Gartner Group in a study that they've done. In addition, I'd like to point out that we have a global footprint that enables you to get the best performance that you need close to your user community. So if you have customers around the globe, we have a what we call an availability zone, which is like a cluster of data centers that's near them. Pardon. In 2014, we had over 500 major service improvements, and in 2015, we had over 700. So we're very fast-paced at continuing to improve our services. That's an important thing to keep in mind, is that we're not resting on our laurels here. Now, today we have over 1 million customers enjoying Amazon Web Services spanning the globe. We've saved over $350 million for our customers using the AWS Trusted Advisor. This is a really amazing service. What it does is it will literally tell you when there's an alternative way that would reduce your bill with AWS. And then we have thousands of partners in our AWS partner network. This includes both consulting partners, or what are commonly called system integrators, as well as technology partners such as ISVs and software as a service. They are betting their business on AWS. We've also reduced our prices 48 times since launching in 2006. So we're constantly trying to look for ways to improve our efficiency and pass the cost along to our customers. Now, coming to AWS for Windows specifically, there are several benefits. And a lot of people may not realize this at first, but Windows is just a really fantastic place. AWS is a fantastic place to run Windows. It works brilliantly. There are several benefits here, and I'll talk about some of these as we go through the next few slides. The AWS service framework, if you will, consists of over 50 services today. Now, these are the major ones, EC2 and S3 in the middle there. EC2, again, stands for Elastic Compute Cloud, and that's where you're renting virtual machines in the cloud. And S3 is our storage service that is very low cost for very large volume storage. Now, in addition to that, we have several, like I said, over 50 services today, but these are some of the key ones that are highlighted. RDS is our relational database service. It's a fully managed service where you can run SQL Server. So if you're looking at a branch office, for example, where maybe you don't have a SQL Server DBA on site, RDS might be a very viable option for you. On the other hand, because it's fully managed, there are certain limitations with it, so that enterprise class applications such as SharePoint, for example, would not be necessarily suitable to run on RDS today. If you have a DBA in your enterprise, they may prefer to run SQL Server in EC2, where they have complete control over it, as opposed to running the managed service with SQL Server on RDS. I also mentioned ELB, which is our Elastic Load Balancer, and that allows you to very easily scale up and down your web server, so you could handle a Super Bowl type spike in demand and immediately scale back down to reduce your cost. Direct Connect is a really cool service. It allows you to connect your on-premise network to the AWS cloud and make our cloud look exactly like it's an extension of your data center. There really is no difference. Once you've got that service in place, there's no difference between running Windows Server in your data center or running it on your AWS EC2 instance. So you can literally run, build out a SharePoint farm before lunch, and you can install SQL Server and Active Directory and Dynamic CRM, any custom .NET applications, Exchange Server, all of that can run in the AWS cloud and look just like it's an extension of your data center. So there's tremendous benefits there. Virtual Private Cloud, or VPC, is part of the magic of how this all works. Once you launch your instances and other resources in AWS, you can put them into your own virtual private cloud, and you can set up the routing tables and the subnets inside of there. So again, it looks exactly like it's an extension of your own data center. It becomes your own data center, literally. CloudFormation is a very important service. It supports what we call DevOps, and it allows you to automatically provision all of your resources in AWS very repeatably. The beauty of this is, let's take an example of SharePoint. Say you're looking at 2016 and you want to do a pilot demonstration for upper management. You could deploy a SharePoint farm with CloudFormation in a matter of under an hour, and you can do your demonstration and then literally click a button to take it all down. So you're not paying for anything when you're not using it. You can deploy your SharePoint farm as needed and stand it back up again. This is ideal for dev and test for SharePoint as well. You could turn off your SharePoint farm over the weekend when there's no QA running on that. Auto-scaling is an important service as well. As I mentioned, it pairs up with Elastic Load Balancer, the ELB service, to allow you to automatically scale your front-end web servers. EBS is Elastic Block Store. It's another very important storage. You can attach 16 terabyte volumes to your Elastic Compute Cloud instances. OpsWorks and Beanstalk are for helping you to administer and deploy your applications at an administrative level. IAM is our infrastructure and access management service that allows you to restrict who has control to which AWS services. And the VM import and export service, very important here because you can bring in your Hyper-V or your VMware images and run those on EC2. And then finally, I'd also touch on our plugins such as System Center, and we have a toolkit for PowerShell and for Visual Studio for .NET and System Center. Those are all very rich plugins that support plug right into System Center, for example, or give you the ability to control all of your AWS resources with PowerShell. So very nice tool set there. Okay, so why EC2? The main reason is that it's very flexible. So you can literally start and stop an instance anytime. So this brings up the notion of disposable computing. If something seems like maybe it's misconfigured, you can literally just throw that instance away. What you want to think about is DevOps. You want to try to imagine how you can provision your infrastructure and your applications repeatedly every single time the same way just by running a script such as CloudFormation does or with PowerShell. CloudFormation is the ideal tool for this so that you can literally just rebuild over and over again, always the same exact way. Now, it's also high performance because you can scale up and down very rapidly to new instance sizes. So if you need more RAM or more CPUs, or you just need more instances, you can do that on the fly very easily once you get into cloud computing. And that's the whole benefit of cloud computing. And then it's cost effective because you're never over provisioning. So you're only paying for what you need, and there's no upfront requirements. And just a reminder, at the bottom of each slide here, as you see, we have Aaron Hunter's email address. So if any questions come up during the presentation or after, please don't hesitate to email ehunter@csgservices.com. Now, I'd like to also mention the AWS Partner Network. This is very important for helping you go to market. When you decide that you want to bring your enterprise workload to AWS, you may want some expertise to help you do that initial migration and help you ramp up very quickly. And the AWS Partner Network is very geared to that. We have thousands of partners around the globe who have specialties in whether it's SharePoint or Exchange Server or .NET applications. They know the cloud well and can help you get ramped up very quickly. So that's something that you may want to take consideration of. Many of these partners have gone through our training and certifications. So we have several certifications that you can see on our website, which are very stringent, by the way. And those, most of our partners have gone through and had several of their staff pass those certifications. Okay, so I'm going to hand it back over to Dennis or Aaron now. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Dennis. We do recommend signing up for the Amazon Partner Network at aws.amazon.com/partners. The AWS Partner Network, or APN, is the global partner program for AWS. It is focused on helping partners build a successful AWS-based business by providing great business, technical, marketing, and GTM support. APN is a tiered program comprised of consulting and technology partners who graduate through the tiers based on their level of engagement with AWS. In addition, partners can join fundamental programs designed to support their unique AWS-based business. Learn more about APN and partner programs below. Feel free to email me directly for more information, and I will have our APN team follow up with you directly. Now let's move on to final Q&A with Dennis and Scott. If you have not already, please use the chat window to post your questions.
Right, this is Dennis. It looks like there's a question. Can existing dedicated instances be migrated to dedicated hosts and maintain existing virtual private clouds, VPCs? It is possible to migrate existing dedicated instances to dedicated hosts. However, it's not a very straightforward process. Today, Microsoft does not allow us to use our licensing keys to activate virtual machine images on dedicated hosts. It is mandatory for customers to use their own, and the only way to do that today is using the VM import tool. So one way to move instances from dedicated instances to dedicated hosts is using VM exports to export that virtual machine and import it into a dedicated host. It is possible to provision those virtual machines, the new virtual machines in those dedicated hosts, in the same VPC as your dedicated instances.
We have another question from the audience. Is there a type of
Yes.
server that fits best in the AWS solution?
Okay, Aaron, thank you for reading that. This is Scott. I'll take that one. The question is about, web server or Active Directory, file and print. Well, this is both a challenge and an opportunity. We have over 30 instance types in AWS, which is a blessing and a curse. So the instance types are optimized, some of them for memory, some for CPU, some for storage. What you want to do is start with the M4 instance type. The M4 is our generic, most generic, general compute type of instance type. Now, it's very suitable for Active Directory and for web servers. It's a very modern architecture, and file and print, by the way. It's a modern architecture and very high performance and very efficient. It's also low cost. Where you would probably want to divert from that is when you see a special need that you may have. For example, if you're doing a lot of number crunching, you probably want to look at our C4 instance type, which is more compute oriented. Or if you have a lot of memory needs, such as SQL Server, you want to look at our R4 or R3 instance family, which has much more memory associated with it. So basically, start with the general type, which is the M4s, and then look for when you have special needs, such as SQL Server or intense number crunching. Then you may want to try a different instance type. There's another question I see about Citrix Zen virtual machines. I believe that our VM import export service may be able to handle that as well. I haven't checked lately, but that's something we can easily find out on our website, Gary, or you could take a look and search on the VM import export service and see if it can handle bringing in those Zen machines, but I believe it does. Now, there's another question here. What data backup solutions are supported? Well, numerous types. There are several of our partners who have built backup solutions that will take your data from EC2 and put it into the much lower cost service that we call S3, our simple storage service. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that if you're doing that with SQL Server or Exchange, that it's not always supporting, the name is not coming to my mind right now, the VSS service that runs in Windows, and I just can't remember what that is right now. I apologize. But it's not, the best thing to do when you're doing that kind of a backup is to literally freeze the instance so that you can ensure integrity of the image that you're taking as a backup. We have other backup services like, for example, SQL Server RDS. Because it's a fully managed service, that backup runs automatically for you. That's one of the benefits of it being a fully managed service. We also have several partners who have developed backup solution software, and those are sold through the Amazon Marketplace. And Dennis reminded me it's called Volume Shadow Copy Services. And
I can take this next one.
Yeah, support for that varies between application types, whether you're in the cloud or not. So always be aware of that. If an application server does not fully support that, then you need to take a snapshot backup to preserve integrity and reliability. So basically what it means is you don't want to have transactions going on in the background while you're doing the backup, unless it supports that protocol.
So the next one is about licensing. Is there a guideline to when cost savings can be realized using BYOL on dedicated hosts? Unfortunately, we don't have this written up. However, I can allude to a few customer case studies that happened over the past few months since we launched. It is possible to save tremendous amounts, especially if you can occupy an entire dedicated host. The thing with dedicated hosts is it allows you to enjoy Amazon Linux rates, which could be up to 70% savings over Amazon Windows rates, depending on the instance types and how long you reserve it. This is just a cap. In some other scenarios, it could be as low as 20, 30%. If you bring your own license that you already own, and you can occupy the entire host, that could be significant savings, depending on the instance type and the reservation period. Like I said, it could be up to 70%. It's tough to quantify because each scenario is different, and unfortunately, we do not yet have a guideline for that. Going back to the earlier question regarding Citrix Zen virtual machines, I was able to look it up earlier. Our VM import tool, very powerful tool, supports 20 virtual machine migrations in parallel. It has a VM export counterpart, allows you to import your own license keys as well. Though today we only support Hyper-V and ESX. So Hyper-V and VMware ESX support for Citrix Zen server is not something that we have at this time. Another question, can you take a physical server to a virtual server while it is still live? To my knowledge, the answer is yes. However, to Scott's earlier point, it is recommended that you do that without any active transactions that are going on. But it is definitely possible to do physical to virtual conversion while it's still live. Scott, keep me honest here.
Well, yeah, that's true. I just want to make sure we're Scott Bradley put in the question. If you could expand on what the scenario you're thinking of, I want to make sure we're addressing the right question there. Dennis is referring to in regards to backups, but maybe you're thinking of, can you change if you have I'm not sure if you're thinking about an import scenario or a dedicated host scenario.
I guess the answer is imports.
Okay, so what you would probably need to do there, Scott, is you need to get an image of your machine. So the way to do that would be to make a Hyper-V image of it or of a VMware image. Once you've got that, then you can use our VM import export service.
So going back to VM imports, supporting Zen servers, it doesn't come out of the box, doesn't mean we're not going to do the right thing for the right customer. So if you have more than a few servers, you should definitely stay in touch. Aaron's email address is on the display. Our platform on our end is also based on Zen. Like I said, it's it doesn't come out of the box, doesn't mean we can't do it for the right scenario.
Right. Okay, any other questions before we wrap up? We really appreciate, these are great questions. We appreciate the audience today. Lots of interaction, and just keep in mind, it's a great opportunity to run Windows Server workloads in AWS.
Thank you, Scott. Yes, thank you everyone again for your time today, and we hope that you found today's presentation valuable. Feel free to email me at ehunter@csgservices.com with any additional questions or to request copies of today's slide deck. Thank you all for attending. This will conclude today's session on corporate applications on AWS.